In this lesson, we are now going to take a look at color harmony and color schemes. But we're not going to go to crazy extents with this because color really is quite subjective. It doesn't really have hard and fast rules. It has more guidelines. In front of us, we see the color wheel on the left, and on the right, a bunch of different splits out from that wheel. And this is your typical kind of splitting of the wheel into various schemes, if you will, or kind of divisions. So at the top we have the primaries, and the first one, primary, is just R, G, and B, red, green, and blue, which we build most of our wheel off of, which is how the cones in our eyes see color. And then we have next to it the arguable primary. Why is this called the arguable primary? Because it is argued in certain art circles that these could also holistically really be primaries as well. If you look at printing or the printing industry, for example, they often print in what is called CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And CMYK also produces perfectly legible and readable images when you're looking at your magazines or books and what have you. Then we have secondary. These are secondary colors. They're really just the colors next to the primaries, hence why they're called secondaries. And you can derive a secondary color scheme, which is a color scheme using secondary colors. And then, of course, you may have heard of complementary colors before. Complementary colors are directly opposite each other on the color wheel. And as we hit this point, you can start to see kind of some subjectivity already taking place. Because you may be saying, well, isn't blue and orange complementary? Aren't red and green complementary? What's up with this color wheel? Why doesn't it work like that? Well, that's because there isn't really a perfect color wheel per se, right? There's just kind of man-made color wheels. And if you look at Photoshop, it doesn't even have a wheel, although you can download a particular wheel. But it doesn't really even have a wheel. It has this color strip. And how would color schemes look if we had to work with this strip, right? So color can be very, very subjective. Then we have analogous colors, and those are really colors that are right next to each other on the wheel. So for example, yellow, orange, and red are considered analogous, and so on and so forth. As you work around the wheel, you can just pick the colors that are next to each other. Split complementaries, really that you have a primary and then just sort of diagonally off from it, instead of directly across, you have a split complementary, which gives you a 3-color scheme there. And then you have monochromatic color schemes. Okay, and monochromatic really just meaning single color. So you'd have a single color. In this instance, we have the blue, and then you'd have various other colors being either higher valued blues, lower valued blues, darker valued blues, more saturated of that blue, less saturated blue. So you're really staying in that one hue range. And that really is an overview of the general splits you might see when it comes to color wheels and color harmony. However, I want to show you a great way to simplify this process where you don't really need to necessarily learn all of this. It's not going to make a huge difference in your life, and we're going to look at that right now. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to achieve color harmony using the rule of 3. Technically, it's the rule of 3 plus 1, but we're going to call it the rule of 3 here for this example. Okay, so let's put it here. Color harmony by rule of 3. And with this system, you really can't go wrong. There may or may not be a U in the word color. It depends how you like to spell it. I just interchangeably use both. All right, color harmony by rule of 3. And what you want to do is you want to pick your primary color, whatever you think the main color in your character is going to be, their main descriptor color. In this instance, let's take blue. Okay, we're going to go with the blue. Pick its value, pick its saturation level, pick the hue as you prefer, and decide to yourself what your primary color is going to be. And so here we are going to have a single primary color. I don't like that. I want it to be a little bit darker. So that will be our primary. And then pick a secondary color. Okay, so I'm just going to go with whatever. Let's go with a yellow and orange. Okay, let's take that. It has its own hue and value and saturation level. And important to note, you do want these colors that we're choosing here to be different in value, right? So different in value, and of course different in all the other elements as well. The more difference you can get between them, the better, because that way we're eliminating parallels in our value, eliminating parallels in our color. And as a tertiary color, which we're going to be calling our accent color, I'm going to go for a red. Let's go for this type of red, a very warm red, a very warm and bright red. Okay. And so what we have here is we have a primary, a secondary color, which we have just chosen based on what we feel like. We're being subjective here. And then an accent color. Okay, you could also call it your tertiary color, but let's keep it accent, and I'll tell you why. When we have these selected, all right, let me just get the square selection tool here. When we have these selected, we want to arrange the percentage of color in our particular piece. Let's say it's our character outfit, according to the status of these colors. So, for example, the primary color, let's use black for the notes. Our primary color, we will want to have around 50% coverage and communication to the viewer that this is the primary. So most of the color on that character, whether it's their suit or their outfit or their costume, is going to be blue, this blue, or the primary color. So 50%, you want your color split here to be 50% to your primary. Then when it comes to your secondary, you want your secondary to be 30%, right? 30% of the color used on your character to define their color scheme will be the secondary. And then last but not least, the accent or the tertiary color will be the last 20%. Okay, so that you have an uneven split, right? A asymmetrical split of the colors. Now, when you're building a character, when you're painting a character and coloring a character, this does not mean that you only use these colors for the character. No, rather this is the color scheme of the character. The hair is still going to be whatever their hair color is going to be. The skin is still going to be their skin color. If they're wearing watches or accessories or bangles or what have you, you can choose whether or not you want that to be part of the scheme or not. But generally, if they're holding something that simply cannot be part of the scheme, for example, they're holding a golf ball. You know, golf balls are typically white, tennis balls are typically green. So you would still color things in the way that they are, but you want the overall vibe and feeling of your character's clothing or their outfit and their shoes and their general accessories or their feel to be these three particular colors. So that if you were to put these colors down and say, hey, what characters do you think fit this scheme? So let's take, for example, this particular color scheme I have here. It just occurred to me now that I used red, yellow, and blue, but nevertheless, I would think something like X-Men, maybe Cyclops, when I see these colors, right? He's got a blue suit, he's got yellow straps, he's got his red visor. And actually, here's a perfect example in this instance. If you're not familiar with the X-Men character Cyclops, the comic book version character, you will note that the color splits kind of apply to him in this way as well. The only thing that's red is his visor on his glasses things, and then he's got yellow straps, but most of his suit is blue. So he's actually a pretty good example in that case. Obviously, we can't put an image of the dude here. Nevertheless, I want to reinforce that you want the values between your colors to vary. So a simple check to do this in Photoshop, and we'll do a more advanced check a little bit later on, is to just color pick and check the value level, right? Where is that blue? All right, maybe that's about a 4. Where is that yellow? Looks like a 3. Where is that red? It's like a 1.5 on the value scale, right? Because you want that variation of value, because the viewer's brain is perceiving that value. Now, let me just add a little extra thing. Feel free, you heard me earlier say it's the color harmony by rule of 3, and then I did mention +1. Feel free to add in an additional accent of just value, whether it's black or grays or whites, because that can also help add to it, obviously, depending on what you are doing. All right, but the rule here is to strive to keep the color usage, the general scheme usage, to 3 colors. Don't use more than 3, don't use less than 3. I mean, you can actually get away with using less than 3, to be honest with you. That means you really just eliminate the accent color. But consider and contemplate this very simple way of really getting great color schemes by just using the rule of 3. That is it for this lesson. I'll see you in the next lesson.